Hey everyone, Angela and Steph here from Brooklyn, New York.
Hi friends.
Today's video is looking at a move that we both do a lot in our classes that we have dubbed the hip bookwork. I'm pretty sure you named that.
This is wonderful work to find that interplay of strength, stability, and mobility in the deep
rotators.
The deep rotators of the hip, which are also part of your deep core hamstring.
Exactly. Yep, pelvic floor too.
Right. And the reason we like this is it gives us a lot of feedback, we find,
Yes.
teaching it. It gives our students, it gives us a lot of feedback in weight shift and what the hips need to do from the yoga mat to more dynamic movement, like running, playing tennis, chasing after your kids in the playground, cycling. So it's very practical, it's very practical applications.
Yes. Yep, and it also find that it's been great for people getting that strength back in their hips, especially if they find they have a lot of hip pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want a demo or me demo?
I'll demo.
Great. All right. We'll put a blanket underneath your knees because we have a hard surface floor.
Now the reason we call it the hip book, right? Think about a book and the cover of a book, right? The cover of the book moves away from the first page, right? So you want to think about your pelvis now moving like a book.
Yes. Thank you for reminding. So oftentimes we are moving our legs around our pelvis. So our pelvis is dubbed the fixed position and the legs move around it. One of the things that's great about a practice like yoga and movement is that we can then change that up. So Steph's going to slide her left leg back behind her. She can lift that leg into the air. So she lifts that leg into the air. She's keeping that lift through her rib cage here. And we'll show you a trick that will help that as we go into the hip book work. But she's going to lift the left side of her pelvis. So what she's doing is she's going to rotate her pelvis around her fixed right thigh.
Watch Angela's hands.
Her thigh is the fixed position. The pelvis is rotating up. She wants to imagine, she can imagine squeezing a block on the inside of that right thigh to help draw that left hip up towards the ceiling. That's opening the book. She just opened her book. Now I'm going to ask her to close the book and drop the left hip down, but not just level. We're going to ask her to drop that left hip down all the way to that inner right thigh where that block was. She is really closing the book. And now we're lengthening those external rotators on the right side. And she's just going to continue to move in and out of this because it's a much nicer exercise to move through versus in that static hold. Right? So as she's moving in and out, look, her low back is also rotating. As soon as I brought attention to that, she's like, oh yes, I could see. She pushed down into her hand, she fired up serratus, she fired up those obliques. She's engaging through the trunk now to keep that back rib lifting.
That's collapsed. That's engaged.
Yep. So go ahead and release out of this stuff. Let's do it on the other side. So then they can see this hip, but before you do it on the other side, I'm going to make you take this resistance band. So if you have a long resistance band, even a yoga strap could work. We're going to pull that nice and tight, and she's going to place that under her hands. Yep, so now the band, its job is to pull her rib cage to the floor, so she's going to resist that. She's going to push her rib cage up into that resistance band. And she's doing that by engaging not only her transverse abdominis, her rectus, but also her obliques. Right? I know she will tell you right now that she's feeling that work from the forearms to the shoulders as well.
100%.
She's going to slide the right leg back behind her. Right leg, right leg. Right. And she's going to keep that right leg straight the best she can and lift that right leg into the air. Now she's got this extra feedback here with this band that she can lift up into, and as she goes into the hip book work, she's rotating the pelvis, so the muscles on this side are getting smaller, or shorter I should say, and then when she drops the hip, they're getting longer. So I'm going to use this band, right, this green band, to say this is roughly where those external rotators are, drop the hip, and when she drops the hip, they stretch out, and when she lifts the right side of the pelvis, they contract, they become shorter. Beautiful, Steph. How's that feel?
It feels great, and the band is so helpful for my brain to click into the cues in my practice toolkit that I have to keep going back to. Right? So keeping that low core engaged, keeping the weight shifted, making sure that I'm moving the pelvis, the trunk comes with me versus shortening. Right, so it keeps me out of, I have particular compensation patterns, we all do, they're as unique as our laughs. So the band helps me with mine so I can go into a more organized instructions and organized movement.
Yeah, that's great. Love it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on it?
I like this, I'm also a run coach. I like this for my runners because I feel like it's a more interesting way to explore your deep hip rotators than clamshells.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with clamshells, but when we do one particular pose or exercise or move a lot, we can get into a little bit of a movement rut, right? So it's nice to have a variety of tools in our toolbox. I do also like this for, Angela does a lot of work with our postnatal community.
Yes.
This is incredibly important. Do you want to talk a little bit more about why this is one of the top 3 things you give your postnatal friends?
Yes, because the firing of those deep rotators and that connection to the pelvic floor. So a lot of times with postpartum or postnatal, right, the pelvic floor becomes a little desensitized perhaps, or a little understimulated or overstimulated. There's so many different things that can happen. Something happens, pelvic floor takes on the weight of it, so to speak, and the hips can really help offload the pelvic floor. And so I find that with a lot of my women who come in, even for just hip pain and aren't coming in for postnatal stuff, that doing exercises that help isolate those deep rotators and get the pelvis to move around the thigh bone really gives them that connection, that brain-body connection that you often talk about in your classes. It gives out, it's like, oh, I have a hip, I feel the hip. And the other thing I like about this one is that we can do the eccentric load. I love the eccentric loads, and those muscles are hard to eccentric load.
Yeah, 100%.
Really. So it's a great way to get that eccentric load on the deep rotators.
Yeah, and I like it too because it flips the script on how we move. And Ange talks about this a lot in her classes. What's the fixed point? Usually, especially for runners, we get caught in this right-left plane. I call it the robot plane, the sagittal plane. But when we're doing this hip work, it keeps the arms and the legs fixed. The only reason my leg is moving here is because my pelvis is moving. And then my low back's going with me. My pelvis is driving this movement car, so to speak. And that is great to remember, okay, I can keep the limbs fixed and move my trunk. My trunk has movement. My spine has movement. My pelvis has movement. So it takes a nice step back and reminds us we have other planes of the body versus what I call the robot plane. So that's the hip bug. Let us drop a comment below. Let us know if you have any questions, or when this comes up in class. Always feel free to ask us questions on Zoom or in real life. But this is a good one to add to your hip toolkit.
Yep. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye, friends.